Hey folks, thanks for watching my monologue. I'd like to encourage you to visit Guns Etc. They're strong supporters of our president and the principles our country was founded upon. Guns Etc. is 10,200 square feet and it's a firearm lover's paradise. And for all your online firearms needs, just click on gunsetc.com. And if you like my monologues, please subscribe to our channel. Thanks. Well, welcome back. Tuesday, March 31st, 2020. Are you like me and feeling this is just a little bit like impeachment in a way? It's difficult to watch the same single story every morning, every hour, every day when the facts just haven't changed that much. I worry about what we're missing and not focusing on. It's the thing we don't focus on that is always the terrible surprise. In the late 1990s, we were on a holiday from history, as Charles Krauthammer put it. As he put it after 9/11, quote, you don't get to a place like this overnight. It takes at least, a decade. We are now paying the wages of the 1990s, our holiday from history. During that decade, every major challenge to America was deferred. The chief aim of the Clinton administration was to make sure that nothing terrible happened on its watch. Accordingly, every can was kicked down the road, from Iraq to North Korea to Al-Qaeda. He went on. Carl Sagan invented a famous formula for calculating the probability of intelligent life in the universe. Estimate the number of planets in the universe and calculate the tiny fraction that might support life and that have had enough evolution to produce intelligence. He prudently added one other factor, however, the odds of extinction. The existence of intelligent life depends not just on creation but on continuity. What is the probability that a civilization will not destroy itself once its very intelligence grants it the means of self-destruction? Haunting, no? Consider what we don't pay attention to. When Dick Cheney had his hearings in 1989 in the U.S. Senate to be the Secretary of Defense, he didn't receive a single question about Iraq. He became Secretary of Defense. And then the first Gulf War came. By the way, his boss, President George H.W. Bush, received upwards of 90% approval ratings a year before he was unseated by Bill Clinton. Why? He had those approval ratings because of the Gulf War. The economy brought him down. When Donald Rumsfeld had his hearings in front of the U.S. Senate to become the Secretary of Defense, not a single question about Afghanistan was tossed his way. He became Secretary of Defense, and then 9/11 came. By the way, Bill Clinton didn't expect to win the presidency in 1992. He expected Mario Cuomo to run and lose to George H.W. Bush because 90% approval. And after Bill Clinton thought he would lose the nomination to Cuomo and Cuomo would lose to Bush, he, Clinton, would run in 1996 and win his first term. It's what we're not looking at. Sure, there are always experts who warn. As I mentioned yesterday, if we paid attention to the Steve Emersons of the world and the Daniel Pipeses of the world, and a few others, we would have foreseen 9/11. Had we paid attention to what Tevi Troy wrote in 2016, we'd have been ready for the coronavirus. Or if we read the stories about the dysfunction of healthcare and hospitals in New York City since at least 2015, we'd have been more prepared there for this. But we were on a national holiday from history then too, weren't we? Yes, there were people who warned of China. I've been talking about China ever since I opposed PNTR in the 1990s. But here in America, the issue in healthcare was not precision and quality. The issue was coverage, mass coverage. It was quantity. It was Obamacare. Cover as many people as possible. Spend billions and billions to do it. Bend the cost of the health care curve down. Remember that line? We did and we didn't, but we spent the money. And, well, how's America's health care look right now? So good that one disease has caused red lights and sirens to blare from the top of the Empire State Building. And trillions to dump from the economy, and trillions more needing to be spent to help the very Americans the American government put out of work and shut down. Every holiday ends in fire or ice. The 1990s ended in fire on 9/11. The halcyon days of the mid-2000s now are on fire. Do we have the right firemen to put it out? I'm not sure. I was asked in an interview today, how did this all happen so fast? First Amendment freedoms, travel freedoms, the freedom to work, all curtailed in a matter of weeks. Bill Bennett and I published a piece in Real Clear Politics today on this, and I spoke a little bit about it yesterday. We've lurched from holidays to pandemoniums, and everything is now a crisis, in part because we've misused the English language. I'm reminded of a saying from Confucius, when words lose their meaning, people lose their liberty. Ralph Waldo Emerson put it this way: the corruption of man is followed by the corruption of language. People you disagree with are idiots, Republicans are Nazis or fascists. What historian Richard Hofstadter once labeled the paranoid style in American politics in 1964 to describe the Barry Goldwater movement is now firmly at home in our political and social rhetoric today. Hofstadter wrote that he used the word paranoid simply because no other word adequately evoked the sense of heated exaggeration, suspiciousness, and conspiratorial fantasy he was trying to use to describe the American conservative movement of the early 1960s. He was wrong about that, but I think his words may be right about the movements afoot in America today. From the moment of Donald Trump's election, respected editorialists and political commentators said his election would ensure everything from a global recession to existential threats to the Constitution. Donald Trump, to too many members of Congress, was a dictator, someone who was tyrannizing our communities, and deserved impeachment if impeachment were to have any meaning whatsoever. He reminded them of Germany in the 1930s. Joe Biden, the frontrunner for the Democratic Party nomination, has said several times our president is an existential threat to America, meaning he can put our country out of existence. This all long before anyone ever heard of Wuhan or social distancing. That kind of irresponsible rhetoric, analysis, and forecasting has helped pave the way for simply too much panic or paranoia, a tendency to believe the worst, a disposition to overreact, to make everything seem like pandemonium and crisis. Aristotle taught us that man is unique among the animals because we, humans, have the capability of reason and language. What happens when we misuse language and lose all reason? To me, something very much like this based on so-called experts who went from projecting 2 million American deaths to now 100 to 200,000 potential deaths. Now, even, we're being told perhaps around 80,000 deaths. But guess what those numbers are based on? They're based on the University of Washington's Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation, which project, to quote the Wall Street Journal today, an estimated 81,114 deaths over the next 4 months, with 95% confidence that the number would be between 38,242 and 162,106. Now, who here has ever heard the number 38,242 from any national spokesman or editorialists except from the Wall Street Journal today? Nobody. Because we are trained and conditioned to believe the worst all the time. Because frenzy and agitation are the business of the media and now government. I can't tell you how many emails I've received in the last 2 days telling me how irresponsible I am for talking like this. Most of them tell me we are going to see 2 million Americans dead, of all ages. Where did they get that? Oh, that number was a number we heard from Dr. Fauci and others, but they gave up on that number about 2 weeks ago. But people still stick with it, always believing the worst. And there is no, to borrow from Aristotle, actual reasoning behind even using that number. I'm sorry for my French, but how in the hell is America going to see 2 million deaths when the total world number of deaths is under 43,000 right now? From China to India to Italy to here, combined 43,000. I know China cannot be believed, but my gosh, really? Does anyone stop and think about what they are saying and what the facts are? No. Crisis, agitation, frenzy, pandemonium. Worst case scenarios, always. That is what a distortion of language and reason and a default of calm and Americanism has brought us. The president is an existential threat. Why wouldn't the disease be? Of course he isn't. And of course it isn't. Heck, you know me. I've been shouting, well, not shouting, but discussing at length and for years the drug problem in America. We just celebrated cutting our death toll from overdoses down to 67,000. You think the coronavirus will take that many lives here? I've never suggested, and Bill Bennett never suggested, and John Walters never suggested, and so many of us never suggested anything like what we're doing on the coronavirus to save the lives and prevent the deaths and overdoses and uses of illegal drugs. Maybe there never was a war on drugs, but there sure was a lot of criticism on it. Maybe there was never a war on drugs when you look at what we're doing here, and not when you know what a war is. Which has led us to a new perversion of language, which quite frankly disturbs me a great deal. Essential jobs or essential employees. I don't know. My dad taught me, and I remember exactly where, in a hotel in New Orleans at a cousin's wedding, that every job matters, and no real job is more important than any other real job. He said exactly this. You think we could get along without the men who collect and take away our garbage? Or the people who clean our hotel room? We can't. My dad was a doctor, by the way. I learned a world in that question he asked me. But you know, as I said last week, virtues are at a great discount right now, and work used to be a virtue too. Virtues are universal, not conditional to time, place, or culture. But now we evidently qualify and distort work too. Some of it essential, some not. Which has to mean some workers are essential and some not. And what taught us that? A virus born from a country whose politics was supposedly a workers' paradise and whose health and sanitation were and still are in the gutter, a place that calls itself a republic. All corruptions of language. It's not a workers' paradise. They engage in slavery. It's not a republic, it's a tyranny. And supposedly we can't criticize them for that or say that because supposedly we're not better than they are. You know what? Yes, we are. I'm Seth Leibsohn. We'll be right back.